Everybody, welcome to Conventional Wisdom Sucks. I'm Ann Riley. I'm so happy to be here, and I am really happy you are here too. So, just a reminder, please subscribe to the channel and leave your comments and questions whenever you want, and I will do my very best to get to them. Okay, today we get to tackle our very first subject matter, which is conventional wisdom says there is a God. Now, I picked this topic because the concept of God has been is as old as humans, it seems like. So I thought maybe it was important to look at the history of human beings and understand uh, this concept a little bit better, how it developed a little bit better. So pretty much we know that scientists and archaeologists, anthropologists, sociologists have gone around and looked at civilizations and have understood that there has a concept of God developed in almost all of these civilizations, almost all of them. You know, all over the world, independently, they created this concept of God. It's not the same God, but it is a very universal occurrence that they all created the idea of God. So let's take a look at how humans developed. So, about 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens emerged from the primate group on Earth, and they had one distinguishing characteristic. They had very big brains. Now, all animals have brains, and generally, the role of a brain is to coordinate all the cells in a body so that they work together and keep the body alive. For instance, a tiger has 300 trillion cells, and the tiger brain keeps all those cells working together so that the tiger itself can live. Well, this same thing happens to humans. We have a brain that coordinates our 35 trillion cells, and it keeps us alive. But we had such big brains that we developed a way to use those brains a little bit differently. And that is that we did all the coordinating efforts that all the other brains do, but we had enough capacity left over to think. And when we think, we create ideas. And ideas are thoughts that we can put into action to change the world around us and to change ourselves. Like, for instance, if we say I'm cold, they can get clothing, or they can build a house, or they can do they can take some action to make their life better. And that proved to be a really good evolutionary advantage for humans. But one thing that happens when humans think is that they looked around themselves and decided, why are we here? They could see that they were like other animals, but they were also different. None of these other animals seemed to be asking this question, why are we here? At least that they could tell. But they were asking it. And they were, really interested in the answer. And so they did what people have done from time immemorial. They looked around the world and looked at everything they saw, and they tried to come up with answers that fit what was going on in the world around them. And I used an example of Apollo, the sun god, in the ancient Greek culture. So, the ancient Greeks, like all kinds of people, probably wondered, why does that sun come up every day and then travel across the sky and go down every night? And they didn't know. So several people made up the story somewhere along the line that there was a god named Apollo, and he had a chariot, and he rode that chariot across the sky, and put the chariot away at night, and the next day he rode it again across the sky, and that was what the sun was. And these people looked at that and they said, well, every day the sun goes across the sky, comes up, goes across the sky, and sets at night, so that must be right. It must be Apollo, the sun god. So, and every culture had their own version of why the sun comes up and in the morning and goes down at night. But in a way, I think that religion was the early science. This was people trying to figure out what was going on around them. And since they didn't know, they filled it in with this kind of a being like them, a being that was human like, that would do these extraordinary things. And that was the best they could do. That was the most sense they could make of the world. And here's the problem. When you do that, when you create an extraordinary human to do these extraordinary things, there's evidence that the thing occurred. The sun is going across the sky, but there's no evidence that it was the god Apollo or any other god or any other force doing it. And least of all, there wasn't any kind of concept of a star. Well, maybe it's just a star was shining. Nope. This was a very tenuous situation, because now you have the idea of an extraordinary being doing things that you can't prove that they're doing it. You can prove the thing was done, but you can't prove that it was an extraordinary being doing it. And I think that's where people got into a situation where you have these beliefs and you create a God that is a belief, because you can't prove that that God actually did it, but you can't say that God actually didn't do it because the sun's going across the sky. So here we are with people creating all kinds of versions of extraordinary beings doing extraordinary things so that to make sense of the world. And that is what religion is. So the question then is that I have is that how did religion come from this concept of trying to answer questions about nature to the conventional wisdom we have today, that there's a omnipotent deity with all of these rules, and we have institutions that tell us what we can and we can't do? How did that happen? Well, next time we'll talk about that. Okay, thanks for joining me. Bye.